Meet our protagonist, Toru Iban. He and his best friend, hero Sane, lead a top-tier group of warriors together. They were childhood friends, and the whole party shared a strong bond, always supporting each other on and off the battlefield. It seemed like nothing could ever break this brotherhood. But then, the other members of the party sat him down and announced that he was being kicked out. Toru clutched his head, stunned. Sane feigned concern, saying that Toru's power was too weak compared to the rest of the group, and it would be a tragedy if he died in battle. As you'd expect, our protagonist was in shock, just gaping and looking around in stunned silence. Toru looked his fiancée, Lisa, straight in the eyes, hoping to find some sympathy. But she showed no empathy whatsoever, simply agreeing with the party leader's decision. Toru then noticed the ring on her hand, realizing it wasn't the one he had given her for their engagement. Glancing at the other female members of the party, and then at Sane, Toru instantly understood the painful truth. The hero had slept with all of them, including his fiancée. It felt like a punch to the gut. And our protagonist couldn't hold back any longer. He lunged at the man responsible for all of this and landed a hook on Sane's jaw, blaming him for everything. The other members quickly rushed to Sane's aid and banished Toru from the party for good. Toru walked out of the tavern a broken man, drenched in rain. Toru couldn't stop staring at the engagement ring in his hand, the one he had given to the love of his life. He couldn't get the image of her out of his mind, along with all the negative thoughts that came with it. Collapsing to the ground, he screamed in despair. Finally, when the rain subsided, Toru had no choice but to plan for the future. He opened his combat status screen and compared it to his old friends. While they were strong with high levels, he had been stuck at level 20 for a long time. This did nothing to improve his mood, and to vent his anger, he charged in and killed a black demon dog. Suddenly, his stats shot up astronomically, and his power reached level 300. It turned out his mysterious skill was experience accumulation, and once he reached the required level, all of his abilities were maxed out. Surprisingly, Sane was only at level 60. Toru couldn't help but feel proud of his progress. Looking up at the sky with a satisfied smile, he finally felt like things were starting to look up. A desire for adventure took hold of Toru, and he decided to travel to the neighboring country of Armand. The first thing he noticed upon entering Armand was a slave shop. Thinking about his loneliness and the betrayal of his friends, Toru wished for a companion by his side, someone who would never leave him. As he entered the shop, he was greeted by a greasy salesman, who immediately started showing off the most expensive slaves, from lizardmen to battle elves. However, Toru was looking for something cheaper. The salesman led him to the back, where the uglier and weaker slaves were kept in cages. A small girl caught Toru's eye, making him wonder about her. Toru noticed she had some beast-like features, such as a sprouting tail, but her other features were still human. Her price was very cheap because she suffered from a rare disease. But this didn't stop Toru from deciding to buy her. He left the shop with the little girl, whose name was revealed to be Kaede. Afterward, Toru took Kaede to see a doctor, who revealed that the disease was very strange and could only be cured by a medicine made from the heart of a pure dragon. With a look full of compassion, Toru promised Kaede that he would do everything he could to help her recover. With determination, Toru began his journey to find the dragon by diving deep into a dense forest. The other mythical creatures there kept their distance, sensing his high power level. Finally, he spotted the silhouette of a giant black dragon. This would be his first time facing one. Toru realized this was a chance to test his own limits. Normally, it would take an entire army to slay a dragon. But for Toru, a single sword strike was enough to sever the beast's head. The dragon's heart was finally in his hands. After returning home, Toru prepared the precious medicine for Kaede. She stared at the potion in amazement, unable to believe someone would sacrifice so much to help her. After drinking it all, Kaede quickly fell asleep. The next morning, Toru woke up to find Kaede still sound asleep beside him. He decided to have dragon meat for breakfast and asked the chef to prepare it for him. Surprisingly, despite how dangerous dragons were, their meat was delicious. Toru even brought a dragon meat burger for Kaede. Seeing Kaede devour the burger in minutes, he realized just how starved she was. Just then, Toru also noticed the tattered clothes Kaede was wearing. So, Toru took Kaede shopping. He bought her clothes in the latest styles, like crop tops and short skirts. Kaede now looked completely different from the malnourished slave girl who had been locked up in the shop. Overjoyed by this fortunate turn of events, she couldn't hide the smile on her face. Kaede then asked Toru to buy her 2 iron fans as weapons. At first, he was hesitant, thinking she wouldn't be able to handle such heavy fans. However, when Kaede proved they were completely light for her thanks to her special strength, Toru decided to buy them for her. After they finished shopping, the two sat on a park bench to rest and share a snack. Kaede called him Master, which made Toru uncomfortable, and he asked her to call him something else. This immediately triggered Kaede's fear of abandonment, making her worry that Toru would leave her. Toru quickly reassured Kaede, affirming that he wanted her to stay by his side for the rest of his life. Kaede was overjoyed to hear that and cheered with excitement. Toru then commented on Kaede's hair, when suddenly, he felt a surge of power welling up. Staring at his hands, he couldn't understand where this pressure was coming from. Magical energy began to course through his veins, and even our protagonist was surprised by its intense strength. All Kaede could see was her master's body trembling, and she panicked. Opening his status screen, Toru was even more shocked to realize his skill cap had been broken, and a new limit had been set, meaning he had just gained a massive amount of EXP. The force of this power-up was so great that Kaede could feel his aura, which knocked her off the bench. Gradually, Toru got his aura under control and apologized for scaring her, then helped her back up. Afterwards, Toru explained to Kaede how his stats had been boosted, leaving her amazed and happy that her master was growing even stronger. Looking at his stats again, Toru was confused when he realized he had kept his level of 50, while the normal level cap was only 10. Not wanting to worry Kaede any further, he pushed his curiosity aside and turned his attention back to her. He asked if she needed anything, and just as she was about to say something, she changed her mind and said no. Toru gently coaxed her into revealing her wish. And she finally revealed that all she needed was a bar of soap, which seemed like a strange request. Nevertheless, Toru obliged, and the two of them returned home. As it turned out, Kaede had never been properly bathed before, and Toru suggested they bathe together. As expected, Kaede was a bit embarrassed by this intimate act, but Toru convinced her that nothing inappropriate would happen. Sitting on a bucket and wearing only a towel, Kaede let Toru wash her hair. As he worked the soap through her hair, Toru noticed a small tail growing from Kaede's lower back and asked her what kind of animal she was. Kaede revealed that she was a fox spirit, which made Toru laugh with amusement, as he had heard that fox spirits had golden fur. As Toru continued to soap up her body, he accidentally brushed against her bare chest, causing them both to recoil in shock. Toru didn't know how to react, but Kaede, the loyal slave, said she was ready to serve her master no matter what he had in mind. Toru, feeling uncomfortable because of Kaede's young age, gently tapped her on the head and joked that he would consider it when she was older. Model. After getting cleaned up, Kaede decided to follow her master's advice and cut her own hair. Strands of hair fell to the floor as she cut them one by one, looking rather innocent and clumsy. Toru, who was watching, thought to himself that he'd never realized how alluring she was. He also noticed 2 spots on her head that it seemed Kaede had forgotten to cut. Kaede revealed that those were her animal ears, which completely stunned Toru since she already had human ears. It seemed the god who created her had a strange quirk when it came to ears. One pair just wasn't enough for them. As the day came to an end, the two of them cleaned the house together. Even though she was his slave, Toru always took good care of Kaede and shared all the household chores with her. Unable to contain her happiness, Kaede told her master that she'd had a wonderful day and hoped they could create many more unforgettable memories together. The next day, Toru returned home looking tired and frustrated. Noticing her master's exhaustion, Kaede curiously asked what was wrong, and Toru revealed that the old shopkeeper had gotten angry with him and charged him extra for the sword repairs. Meeting Kaede's curious gaze, Toru explained that a few days ago, he was cleaning his sword and accidentally broke it. Needing a new weapon, he went to an armory, where the shopkeeper recommended the sturdiest sword. However, just a single swing snapped the metal blade and even shattered the building's window. When the dust settled, the shopkeeper was speechless to see all of his weapons had fallen from their racks and were embedded in the walls. Paying for the repairs took a huge toll on Toru. Not wanting her master to worry, Kaede offered to help, saying she had the perfect weapon for a fearsome warrior like Toru. However, this time it was Toru's turn to be surprised when Kaede led him to the sacred weapon shrine. This structure housed the most sacred weapons, meant to be used only by heroes. Toru was skeptical about whether he was worthy and could actually draw the sacred sword, but Kaede had complete faith in his abilities and encouraged her master. Upon entering the building, the first thing Toru exclaimed about was the vast space inside. Kaede explained that the shrine was rumored to have been built by the gods. She also explained the trials Toru would have to face to claim the legendary weapon. First, open the locked door to the sanctuary, and second, pull the sword from its pedestal. Sounds simple, right? That is, until Toru saw the massive door. Despite its intricate design, the door looked like something only an incredibly strong giant could push open, especially since it had no handle. However, this was where Toru's leveled-up skills came into play. With just a light touch, the door unlocked automatically. No one was happier than Kaede, who cheered with delight. The two entered and saw the sacred sword right before them, resting simply on its pedestal. It seemed as if the sword had merged with it, and even our protagonist, with his extraordinary strength, had trouble trying to pull it out. However, after several attempts, Toru finally managed to get it in his grasp. Kaede revealed that the sacred weapon adjusts itself to its wielder, so even though it looked like a one-handed sword, it would soon adapt to Toru. The protagonist realized that none of this would have been possible without Kaede's help and advice, and he expressed his gratitude to her. However, Kaede, humble as always, simply called him the Chosen One. Hearing these words of praise, Toru's heart swelled with pride, as he had never received such encouragement from his old party. As they stepped out of the building, Toru revealed that once they reached the city, the two of them would form a party and start new adventures together. A satisfied smile appeared on Kaede's lips, who was simply happy to be by her master's side. Meanwhile, at Toru's old home, Sane was busy getting intimate with the other female members of the party. It seemed they were exhausted after hours together, as the girls were all panting, and Sane sat down to rest as well, thinking about Toru. Sane couldn't hide the gleeful smile on his face. He seemed quite pleased with himself for betraying his best friend, not only by kicking him out of the party, but also by taking his fiancée. Unbeknownst to Toru, Lisa and Sane had been secretly seeing each other for a long time. Approaching the other two female members, Nei and Swara, Sane used his secret skill, Evil Eye of Fascination, to hypnotize them and turn them into his sex slaves. It was this very skill that allowed him to turn the entire party's loyalty against Toru. Sane's gaze was powerful enough to make Lisa forget her love for Toru and betray him without a second thought. In truth, Sane had always been jealous of Toru. Toru had a natural charm that women were easily drawn to, which filled Sane, his supposed best friend, with resentment. The moment San unlocked his Evil Eye of Fascination skill, Toru's fiancée was the first person he charmed. Soon, he had the entire party under his control and easily convinced them to abandon the poor warrior. Enjoying the enchanted caresses of the two girls, Sane felt satisfied that he no longer had to put up with any weak members in the party. This allowed him to focus completely on defeating the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord was a being that appeared alongside a calamity every 100 years, and it could belong to either the demon or human race. Thinking of Lisa, who was still deep under his spell, Sane couldn't help but imagine the fame and fortune he would receive after defeating that mythical being. He pictured the entire world kneeling at his feet and let out a victorious roar. San was overjoyed, thinking he was living the perfect life. However, this arrogant warrior was about to face reality when he received news that the legendary dragon he was tasked with slaying had already been killed. Sane couldn't hide his surprise, asking the old man who it was that had slain the mighty beast. However, the old man couldn't provide any more information, only saying that they had found the dragon's headless corpse in the forest. Enraged, Sane punched a nearby tree. Lisa, Nay, and Soara, his companions who were being controlled by his magic, tried to comfort him with fake smiles. Sane then turned his attention to the sacred temple of divine weapons. However, he was in for another shock when he discovered the building was empty. At this point, he couldn't contain his rage, and when Lisa tried to touch him, Sane slapped her away and threatened to kill her if she dared to touch him again. But now, Sane began to wonder if Toru had something to do with all of this, since everything started going wrong after Toru's banishment. However, the thought that a low-level warrior like Toru could defeat a red dragon and steal a sacred weapon was impossible. So he decided to change his plan. One way to gain public recognition was to complete the Luntada dungeon. When he asked the locals for directions, they simply pointed forward, where a giant pit was waiting. Sane fell to his knees, unable to comprehend how some warrior had beaten him to this quest. Backtracking to 1 month earlier, Toru and Kaide were in the town of Luntada to receive their fake adventurer cards. Kaide achieved rank D, while Toru had dropped from rank S to rank B. While wandering through the town, Kaide commented on the strong smell of alcohol, which Toru revealed was completely normal since the place was famous for its entertainment and festivals. The innocent girl couldn't imagine what her master would want to do in such a place, and tried to distract him by mentioning a dungeon in the city. However, Toru already knew about it and said they would explore it the next day. Toru then explained to Katie the function of dungeons for adventurers. Many adventurers made a living by defeating monsters within them and selling the treasures and materials they found. More determined adventurers would try to reach the core stone at the bottom of the dungeon. This was a rare material that allowed its finder to receive many skills and other rewards. The next day, Toru and Kaide began exploring the first floor of the dungeon. Toru was impressed with the little girl's abilities, as she was able to use magic to destroy the many wild creatures present there. Thanks to Toru's experience multiplier ability, Katie also leveled up very quickly. Determined to become as strong as her master, she defeated monster after monster independently until they both reached the 3rd floor. Even though she had reached level 30, Katie wasn't ready to give up yet, despite them having collected a large amount of treasure. However, Toru asked her to slow down, as overworking herself would do more harm than good. They then used a magical item that acted as a storage bag and returned to the surface. Kaide had collected a large amount of coins, and she ordered a grand feast to enjoy with her master. Although Toru was a bit hesitant to share the reward she'd worked so hard to earn, Kaide's pouting look was enough to make him start filling his plate. After a satisfying day and with full stomachs, the two returned home together. While walking, Toru couldn't help but thank his lucky stars for the little companion who had helped him feel that life was worth living again. The next morning, Toru woke up abruptly as Kaide gently nudged him. With his vision still blurry, he could make out the girl sitting beside him, wrapped in a sheet. As his eyes gradually cleared, he was shocked to see how much she had changed overnight. Her ears had grown long, and her body had become much more feminine. Kaide now had rabbit ears, but that wasn't the only thing that had changed. She had transformed into a fully grown woman. A drop of sweat rolled down Toru's cheek as he asked if she was really Kaide. 1,000 questions raced through his mind, wondering how this could have happened. His eyes were glued to Katie as he waited for her answer. Katie looked embarrassed as she tried to cover her new, curvy body with a piece of cloth. Toru sat cross-legged, listening intently as she explained the change. However, it didn't seem to make complete sense to him. She went on to explain that she had heard that when a child surpasses level 20, Their body rapidly develops overnight to balance with their increased power. Toru began to think and gradually realized this might not be so far-fetched. He admitted that the body and power automatically balancing upon leveling up wasn't impossible, as he himself had changed his race when he suddenly leveled up. Now, things seemed to be making sense, but there was still one problem. He couldn't imagine that leveling up would turn the little girl into a beautiful young woman overnight. While Toru was lost in thought, Katie stood there, innocently looking at him, waiting for him to finish his train of thought. While Toru was lost in thought, Kaidi stood there, innocently looking at him, waiting for him to finish his train of thought. Finally, he gave in and asked her why she wasn't wearing any clothes. He was flustered and demanded she put something on. Kaide's bunny ears drooped as she picked up her old clothes, but they were in tatters and she had nothing else to wear. Frustrated and impatient, Toru told her to just wear his clothes for now. Kaide was delighted to hear that and excitedly said that the clothes belonged to him. She immediately started sniffing them, confirming that they really did smell like him. Toru had to fight the impure thoughts in his head, turning his back to give her some privacy to change. He thought his shirt would be big enough to cover her completely. But when he glanced back, he realized she would definitely need a pair of pants, too. Toru quickly covered his eyes and handed Kaide the pants. After that, the two went out shopping, and Kaide finally found the perfect outfit for herself. She asked her master for his opinion, and Toru commented that it suited her well. Seeing her blush at the simple compliment, Toru thought to himself that even though Kaide's body was that of an adult, on the inside, she was still a child. He asked if she could handle the iron fan skillfully, and Kaide started swinging it in every direction to prove it wasn't a problem for her. Toru remarked that with this weapon, she could cast 2 spells at once. After enjoying some happy moments together, the two left town. The townspeople couldn't help but stop and stare at them in amazement. People started whispering and asking each other about the appearance of such a beautiful woman in their city. Some wished for a slave like her, while others just stood by, admiring and praising her beauty. The two awkwardly made their way through the crowd. Toru felt annoyed by the sudden praise for Katie's beauty and the envy from the other men, but he tried to push his frustration aside. When Kaide excitedly told him that she would earn a lot of money for him today, Toru reminded Kaide that she didn't need to worry about earning money, because he still had some left from when he killed the dragon earlier. Today, he just wanted to focus on helping Kaide level up, and he had already prepared bags of food and water. Kaide was as happy as a child. She started wagging her tail and shouting that they were going to have a lot of fun today, reminding Toru once again that on the inside she was still the same little girl as before. Their first task was to deal with an army of armed skeletons. Kaide used her aerial blast attack to easily blow them all away. Then she used her iron fan to shoot the enemies, and as a result, she was victorious. Toru applauded and looked proud of her. However, he started to feel bored and a little sleepy because Kaide's current level was 50, while the required level for the 4th floor was only 15. Kaide noticed Toru was tired, so she asked if he was okay. Toru told her he had been up since early in the morning, so he was feeling a bit sleepy now. Suddenly, Kaide had an idea. In a flash, she cleared the entire area with the help of her iron fan. Then, she spread out a mat and invited Toru to rest on her lap. As expected, Toru happily accepted and commented that she smelled really nice. After a while, he woke up and was surprised to see a new batch of skeleton bones scattered around. It seemed that while Toru was sleeping, the skeletons had attacked, but Kaide had destroyed them without any hesitation, all while he was still asleep on her lap. Toru was stunned to realize she had done it without even flinching. Afterwards, Kaide gently dusted him off with her tail, making Toru feel like he was in sage mode. Suddenly, he realized he knew nothing about her current stats, so he immediately asked her. However, he thought she might not want to reveal them. Contrary to his expectations, Kaide was more than happy to do anything he asked. He looked at her skill level and other information. Her level was 50, her race was white fox, and her age was 15. He also noticed some skills he believed a mage would have, such as healing wave. chanting, power boost, and attack adjustment. Toru remarked that power boost was a rare ability that only renowned mages possessed. A sudden realization hit him. The girl in front of him was about to become a huge star. He had only asked her to show her stats to clear up his doubts. And now that he was certain of her abilities, he asked if she wanted to go down to even lower floors. And so, they arrived at the 10th floor. Soon, Toru discovered that the way Kaidi's magic worked was astounding. Her magical power was increasing much faster than he could have imagined. Kaidi's magical power recovered much faster than she was using it. Enemy after enemy, Kaidi defeated them all without needing any help from Toru. He even remarked that the Goblin Knights were supposed to be tough opponents. At first, he was worried for Kaidi, but in the end, he just felt sorry for the goblins. Eventually, they reached the 20th floor and Kaide unlocked level 150. The two of them stopped to replenish their energy with some food. Toru asked her if she had any tricks for using magic. She replied that imagining the image was the most important thing. So he closed his hands, imagined a flame, and when he opened them, a flame appeared. On the 90th floor, opponents that even Toru had never faced before appeared. He warned Kaide to be careful, but then realized there was nothing to worry about. She had now reached level 200 and used her freezing ability to eliminate every opponent effortlessly. By the 130th floor, the two of them couldn't sense the presence of any enemies. Suddenly, a core appeared, and Kaide got excited when she realized they had reached the end. At Kaide's request, Toru touched the core, and that marked the end of the first dungeon. It seems that after touching the core, Toru passed out. He woke up to Kaide's loud calls. She told him that the dungeon they were just in had disappeared. They seemed to be at the bottom of a deep pit and could see the starry sky above. Toru noticed a mysterious ring had appeared on his and Kaide's hands. They guessed it was a reward for clearing the dungeon so quickly. Suddenly, 3 screens appeared, announcing that they had received camouflage rings, which allowed them to hide their status, disguise themselves as someone else, or make their status look like someone else's. The second reward for their speedy completion was a dungeon that would be given to both of them. Toru picked Kaide up and jumped out of the pit they were in. 2 days passed, and they were on their way to a city called Einark with the goal of exploring the ruins of the gods. Toru admitted the trip was somewhat pointless, but there were a few things they wanted to do there. The reason for the civilization's destruction and disappearance was still unclear. However, it seemed an advanced civilization once existed here, and the people who created it were called the Great Racers. Toru seemed to be very passionate about exploring ruins, so he was excited for this long journey. On their journey, Kaide asked Toru if he had decided on a name for their party yet. Toru thought for a moment, and finally decided to name the party the Wandering Brigade. When they had some free time, Toru asked Kaide how she became a slave. Before she could answer, a carriage in front of them was attacked by a group of bandits. The two of them immediately rushed in to help. Toru only needed to exhale to blow the bandits away, while Kaide blocked an arrow with her bare hands. The bandits realized their fate was sealed. As it turned out, the carriage driver was a woman named Marianta, the daughter of Count Roata. Toru blushed when he saw her, which made Kaide worry. After Toru introduced himself, Marianta took his hand and asked him to come to her mansion to show her gratitude. Even more, she was from Romaneric, the place Toru and Kaide were originally heading to. They arrived at the mansion, and Marianta's personal maid, Urara, led them to their room. Seeing the soft bed, Toru immediately jumped on it like a 5-year-old child, making him blush with embarrassment when he saw Marianta was still standing at the door. She giggled and invited him to join her on a trip whenever he wanted. The next day, Marianta took them out and showed them the city. Toru was surprised that Marianta was allowed to walk around freely, even though enemies could attack at any moment. Although Urara was there to protect her, Toru was still amazed by Marianta's confidence in her own strength. That's when Urara revealed that she was an S-rank adventurer. Meanwhile, Marianta and Kaide had become very close. Marianta took Kaide to a sweet shop, and Toru gave Kaide some spending money. While everyone was having fun, Toru reminded himself that he was ready to set Kaede free if she wanted. It seemed he had been saving money for her, just hoping to fill the void in his heart after Lisa left him. He admitted that it still hurt to think about her, and believed that if he could just forget everything, he could live a peaceful life without needing a slave by his side. As they passed a large statue, Marianta revealed that it was erected when her father, the lord of the city, was young. It was made by her and the townspeople, so she was very proud of it. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, and Toru wondered if it was an earthquake. The statue suddenly shattered into pieces, and something like thorny vines emerged from the ground. These vines snatched Marianta and other citizens, lifting them into the air, catching Toru completely off guard and unprepared. It seemed these tendrils had carefully chosen their targets. After tossing the victims into the air for a moment, they suddenly vanished into the ground. All that remained were the shattered pieces of the statue and a giant, bottomless pit right where it once stood. Toru and Kaede stared at the enormous, endlessly deep hole where the statue used to be. They were surrounded by citizens who were screaming the names of their grandparents, mothers, and daughters. Toru gritted his teeth as he realized that many civilians had been abducted along with Marianta. However, he didn't have time to analyze the situation further. Urara, who had sworn to protect Marianta with her life, panicked when she saw her master disappear into the enemy's hands. Without a second thought, she decided to jump into the pit to find Marianta. Toru decided not to stop her, but instead called out to Kaede. She didn't need words to understand him. She knew he wanted her to jump into the pit with him. The two of them started after Urara, and Toru asked her to take him along. Although Urara loved her master dearly, she couldn't ignore her duty as a loyal servant. So she said it wasn't appropriate for guests like them to risk their lives. However, Toru knew that Urara was just trying to act tough, and deep down, she really wanted their help. Toru reminded Urara that to find someone, the more people, the better. Besides, they weren't ordinary civilians, but powerful individuals, and their help would surely be useful. When Toru and Kaede offered their help with reassuring smiles, Urara gratefully accepted, somewhat relieved. Toru gripped his sword, and the three of them leaped into the mysterious abyss. The pit was deeper than they thought, but to avoid serious injury, Kaede quickly chanted some spells and created an air cushion. The three of them landed safely at the bottom. Although this underground world was shrouded in absolute darkness, with the talented Kaede by their side, there was nothing to worry about. Without further delay, they began to venture deeper into their journey, as Kaede created a ball of light with her iron fan. The orb floated in the air, following them wherever they went. Finally, they could see their surroundings. Ruins were visible in every direction, and in front of them was a massive gate that could only have been built for giants. On either side of the gate stood two guards in armor carrying shields, but these soldiers were not human-sized. The group of three looked like tiny ants before them. A drop of sweat rolled down Toru's forehead as he tried to comprehend what kind of hell they had willingly thrown themselves into. Urara explained that this place was called the Underground Ruins. The city of Anaric was actually built on a massive archaeological site, and now they were essentially trapped in a labyrinth. Kaede called out to Toru to show him something strange she had just discovered. It seemed the entire place was covered in a strange slime. The question was whether this mysterious slime belonged to the creature that had abducted Marianta and the others, but the slime only appeared in a scattered pattern. Urara suggested that if they followed the slime trail, they might find the monster. Toru decided to take the lead and arrange their formation. He proposed he would be at the front to engage any enemies directly. Urara was assigned to the rear, while Kaede was ordered to stay vigilant in the middle. Everyone raised their guard. Urara gripped her kunai, while Kaede drew her iron fan. The three of them moved forward, determined to complete their mission. The labyrinth walls seemed to be covered in the same vines that had erupted from the ground. Suddenly, they were attacked by ogres carrying their own weapons. As they had predicted, these minor demons were no match for the trio. Eventually, They decided to split up and meet at a certain point. It seemed this labyrinth was endless. Toru seemed exhausted and asked the other two how much deeper this place went. Urara replied that she'd been here many times, but had only made it to the fourth floor. She added that she didn't go any deeper because she didn't know what might be lurking in the darkness. Toru, aware of Keide's abilities, asked if she had caught Marianta's scent yet. Keide replied that Marianta's scent seemed to be coming from the same direction as the sticky slime that was everywhere. While listening to Keide, Toru's defense began to waver, and a monstrous dog nearly attacked him from behind. Even though Urara was quite far away, she managed to save Toru in time, killing the monster in a single blow. Impressed by her high level and excellent skills, Toru asked Urara what her usual job was. With a cold, emotionless expression, Urara calmly replied that she was an assassin. Toru was shocked by the sudden revelation and realized that Urara would have handled the kidnappers herself, even if they hadn't stepped in to save Marianta. Suddenly, Keide announced that Marianta's scent was getting stronger, which meant they were getting close to their destination. They stepped onto a bridge decorated with fire, which led to another giant gate with a mysterious sculpture on top. The entrance was guarded by another army of goblins, this time appearing more elite and ruthless. The army's commander remarked that he didn't expect the group of three to make it this far. The goblins' minds seemed to be just as twisted, because as soon as they saw Urara and Keide, they immediately had wicked intentions. The excited goblins began planning how to enjoy their spoils of war while licking their blades. Both sides stretched, preparing for the battle to begin. Toru noted that since there were two horns protruding from their heads, the enemies must be demons. Keide stepped forward and declared she would clear a path for her master, Toru. The demons sneered, calling humans foolish, then charged at the group of three. But suddenly, they were stopped in their tracks. Looking around, they realized they were surrounded by walls of ice, thanks to Keide's iron fan. Toru smirked, ready to charge at the enemy. However, Urara and Keide asked Toru to let them handle the goblins and go save Marianta instead. Toru entrusted the battle to them and quickly ran towards the large gate. He slipped past the demons blocking his way and shattered the giant gate with a single punch. Sitting on a throne was a bearded man with a horn on his head, controlling a giant slug with long tentacles. The man remarked that the food for his pet had finally arrived. While Toru was busy asking about the reason for the attack, the slug managed to capture him. When Toru asked why he had attacked the city, the strange man replied that the city of Einrich was connected to another city through this underground location. He planned to conquer the entire country, and to do that, he needed to take down the lords to control the whole region. Toru noticed that Marianta had been captured, and at the enemy's audacity, he tore apart the tentacles holding him. The man warned him not to cross the flames, but Toru took it as a challenge. Just as Toru got closer, he was hit by a series of explosions from grenades. The destructive force was so great that the enemy was confident no one could have survived the blast. However, the sight before him made him tremble, his eyes widening in disbelief as he saw Toru standing right in front of him, completely unharmed. Toru smiled, asking the enemy if the explosion had satisfied him, because there was no way he could be hurt by such a weak attack. The man started calling Toru a monster, and immediately fired another barrage of grenades at him, but Toru was completely unharmed, totally unscathed. Toru calmly advanced on the enemy, the explosions leaving not a single scratch on his body. He cut down the enemy and the giant slug. Before dying, the man asked Toru if he was the hero from the prophecy, and Toru replied that he was just an ordinary warrior. Once Toru had destroyed the giant slug with its tentacles, Marianta was freed. She slowly regained consciousness as a worried Urara held her tightly. Urara told Marianta not to push herself. At first, Marianta didn't understand what had happened after the city was attacked. She slowly looked around and saw a giant crater in the ground. Suddenly, she began to panic as she remembered being kidnapped. However, Marianta quickly calmed down when she realized she was surrounded by other townspeople who had also been kidnapped. Soon after, Marianta saw Toru and Kaide standing calmly with smiles on their faces. They were genuinely happy to see that Marianta was okay. Toru began to explain the whole situation to help Marianta understand. He told her that a monster had attacked from the underground ruins, but the only damage the city suffered was a giant hole in the ground. Marianta breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that no one had been killed, and only a few townspeople had minor injuries. Curious, she asked the trio who had saved the town. She assumed it must have been her father. Just then, Urara corrected her, saying that it was Toru and Kaide who had come to her rescue, despite the danger to their own lives. As Urara bowed her head to thank Toru for saving her master, Toru just shrugged and said he didn't want to see Marianta get hurt. Soon, the townspeople began to gather around after hearing the names of the heroes who had saved them and the Lord's daughter. They also knelt to thank Toru and Kaide. Seeing such a warm reaction, both of them were flustered. As if that wasn't enough to make Toru's heart race, Marianta suddenly jumped up, hugged him tightly, and thanked him for protecting the people of the city. Kaide's expression immediately changed, and she reminded Marianta that she was standing too close to Toru while he was enjoying his reward. Afterward, they returned to the castle, where Marianta had a moving reunion with her father, while Toru and Kaide watched from a distance. Kaide praised Toru for defeating one of the Demon Lord's top generals. He asked her how she knew about the general's rank. It turned out that during the battle, the general had revealed he was one of the Demon Lord's 6 strongest generals. Although he was the weakest of the 6, his power was no joke. Suddenly, a loud growl from Toru's hungry stomach drew the attention of the Lord and Marianta. Toru stepped forward, and the Lord thanked him for saving his daughter not just once, but twice. Toru didn't seem used to being praised, so he blushed again and said it was just a coincidence. Marianta asked her father to reward Toru for his bravery, and he replied that he would do everything in his power to show his gratitude to this hero. That's when Urara announced that not only had Toru saved the Lord's daughter, but he had also defeated one of the Demon Lord's top generals. The Lord's expression changed instantly, and he planned to give Toru a huge reward. He asked Toru if he planned to go to the capital and said he would send a letter immediately, but didn't reveal any more details. He said that Toru and Kaide could stay as long as they liked, and that Marianta would keep them company. The two were treated to a lavish dinner until they were stuffed. Toru asked Marianta if they could get permission to explore the underground ruins. Marianta was worried, wondering why he would want to go back to that scary place. Toru explained that, as an adventurer, he was interested in it because it was basically an unexplored dungeon. Unable to contain his excitement, Toru revealed his intense passion for the underground ruins left behind by a mysterious, ancient race. However, everyone else was against the idea. Kaide was afraid he would get hurt, and Urara knew that if Toru went down there, Marianta would follow him. Marianta asked to go with him, bringing Urara along, and promised not to be a burden. Toru understood that since the underground ruins were under the Lord's control, he couldn't just go in as he pleased. In the end, they allowed Marianta to come along on the condition that Urara and Kaide would escort her, and Toru would take the lead, clearing any obstacles in their path. If they sensed any danger, they would retreat immediately. The next day, Toru and Kaide waited for the pair to arrive so they could begin their adventure. Urara appeared in an assassin's outfit, while Marianta was wearing a suit of armor that covered her from head to toe. It seemed she had told her father about their plan, and he had ordered her to wear the armor. However, Toru told her to take off the armor because it would make it difficult for her to move in dangerous situations. Marianta quickly changed into a cuter outfit, much to Toru's delight. The first and second floors of the dungeon had already been explored, so the group headed for the deeper levels. Marianta warned that the next floors were full of monsters and the area was very dangerous. This only made Toru more excited. But he reminded everyone that Marianta's safety was the top priority, so only he would advance into the dangerous areas. Suddenly, Kaide caught the scent of a monster up ahead and used her appraisal skill to identify the source. It seems to be a giant mushroom-type monster. They discovered a mouse that accidentally stepped on one of the vines, and immediately, mushrooms began to sprout from its body. Using her appraisal skill, Kaida determined that the vines contained a potent poison. Toru told the girls to stay back as he planned to go downstairs by himself. Katie insisted on going with him, but Toru reminded her that he'd be fine since he was level 300 and had an antidote ready. He said goodbye to them and entered the mushroom-filled room. Despite touching the vines, Toru was unaffected by the poison. After dealing with numerous mushroom-type monsters, Toru headed deeper into the room. He stumbled upon some cobweb-covered books and treasure chests filled with potions and elixirs. He took an elixir and a mysterious key. Afterward, they arrived at another area that didn't seem to have been thoroughly explored, which looked like an underground fortress. Before going any further, Marianta asked Toru to teach her how to fight, so she wouldn't always have to be protected by Urara. She pleaded, saying she was tired of her own weakness. Kaede agreed with the idea, and Marianta finally convinced Urara. Meanwhile, Toru was living his dream by collecting titles and relics from each room he explored. A bolt of lightning struck from the sky. Catching the attention of the townspeople, it seemed this happened because Toru was unlocking new powers. Urara and Marianta panicked a little when they saw the overwhelming aura surrounding them. Toru apologized for scaring them and explained that it happened because his skills had changed. He checked his stats, and although his level was still 300 and his race was still Dragon, he had received new jobs, including Dragon Knight, Tamir Master, Mimic, and Great Thief. Kaede announced that all of these jobs were high-ranking, but there was a mysterious job title, Mimic, that Kaede didn't quite understand. Marianta and Urara asked Toru to let them join the Manyu Brigade for the time they were in town. At first, Toru was a bit hesitant, but he eventually agreed. As they explored deeper into the dungeon, the number of monsters around them began to increase. Some of the monsters even attacked Marianta, and Toru took this opportunity to teach her how to fight. He instructed her to keep her eyes open and to be more confident when facing enemies. He then demonstrated so she could easily grasp it. Following Toru's instructions, Marianta defeated her first opponent, a giant spider-like monster. She leveled up and reached level 36. After experiencing the thrill of leveling up, both Marianta and Urara seemed unstoppable, and they wanted to explore the dungeon even more. Toru reminded everyone not to rush and decided it was time to return to the surface. However, Marianta was too excited to back down, arguing that there was still time and she wanted to explore some more unmapped areas. Realizing that Marianta wouldn't give up easily, Toru accepted her proposal and everyone agreed to explore a little longer. Suddenly, they came across a wall blocking their path. Although Marianta and Urara believed it was a dead end, Toru felt something was off. He knocked on the wall and noticed the echo was strange. He drew a circle on the weakest part of the wall and then smashed it. To their surprise, there was a secret room hidden behind the wall. They immediately began to inspect the items lying around. Toru found a sword crafted from a mysterious metal, showing no signs of rust despite being made long ago. He realized the sword was forged with incredible technology. Meanwhile, Kaede had found something even more mysterious. She discovered 2 differently shaped eggs, which seemed to have been abandoned long ago, so there was no guarantee they were still alive. Using her appraisal skill, Kaede confirmed that these were the eggs of summoned beasts, artificial creatures created by an ancient race. These beings were used to assist in the daily tasks of their civilization and provide aid in combat. These eggs had been stored for long-term survival, and the only way to awaken them was to pour a massive amount of mana into them. Toru's love for ancient relics came alive as he eagerly picked up an egg to awaken it. He channeled a large portion of his mana into the egg, but nothing happened. Kaede remarked that this was because the egg had been dormant for too long and originally possessed an immense source of mana. This only made Toru more excited, and he began to take on this task in earnest. He poured almost all of his mana into the egg, and suddenly the entire dungeon began to shake. Urara and Marianta panicked at the overwhelming amount of mana. Toru's energy was distorting space, and Kaide remarked that it felt like they were standing in water. However, Toru was only focused on awakening the egg. After realizing the egg was ready, the final step to complete the contract was to draw some blood. He dripped a few drops of blood onto the egg, and immediately, cracks appeared on the shell. The egg exploded as everyone's eyes were glued to it, anticipating the emergence of a giant creature. Kaide and Toru braced themselves for the hatching process. After the egg hatched, they were both surprised to see a one-eyed creature floating in front of them. However, instead of looking like a ferocious beast, it was soft and cute. They both immediately started touching the creature, while Kaide remarked on how beautiful it was. She used her ability to give the creature a bath. Toru wondered if, despite its cuteness, it was worth using so much mana just to awaken it. Hearing Toru doubt its usefulness, the creature suddenly lifted Kaide into the air. Toru was impressed by its ability to carry people, and since it was soft, it was perfect for the job. They decided this creature would be very useful for transporting all the things they had collected. Kaide suggested giving the creature a name, and Toru, as usual, named it Panda. Afterwards, Kaide introduced it to Urara and Marianta. Toru couldn't contain his excitement at the thought of awakening the other strange egg. Returning to the castle, they organized all the relics they had collected, including high-grade healing potions and body-enhancing drugs. They were all mysterious items that had never been seen before. Toru asked Kaide to use her appraisal ability and discover that one of them was a rare elixir that wasn't sold anywhere. The Lord suggested that if they went to the royal capital, there might be a wealthy noble merchant who would buy it, and advised them to sell it at an auction. Toru recalled that there was an auction in the royal capital for nobles and wealthy merchants. Toru decided to sell some of the relics to the Lord and keep the others for the auction. His jaw dropped to the floor when he saw the huge pile of money the Lord paid him. The next few days passed in the city. Toru and the others enjoyed exploring ruins and hunting monsters. Surprisingly, Marianta's passion had helped her reach level 100, while Urara had reached level 80. Both of them now had power equivalent to a hero. Marianta had become very proficient with her sword. Toru remarked that it was almost as if the sword had become a part of her body. He revealed that he planned to leave the city, and immediately, the excited look on Marianta's face vanished. It seemed Toru had received a letter from the royal family, inviting him to attend the royal auction. Before they parted ways, Marianta told Kaide that she was jealous that Kaide got to go with Toru. She wanted to leave home to explore the world, but as the daughter of a count, she had a duty to marry a nobleman, sooner or later, and she would have no choice in who her husband would be. Toru saw this pain and realized she felt like a bird trapped in a cage. Seeing her sorrowful expression, he sincerely thanked her for everything she'd done and promised that they would meet again. Marianta was on the verge of tears when Kaide quickly rushed to hug her. Kaide reassured her that Toru would not forget her. After being assured that they would come back to see her, Marianta said her goodbyes, admitting once more that she wished she could be in Kaide's position. Meanwhile, Sane was slowly tracking Toru's every move. Sane started pulling at his hair when he realized that yet another dungeon had been explored. The townspeople informed him that this dungeon had been around for a month, and someone had arrived first and cleared it before he could. Sane started biting his nails as he realized this was the very place he had intended to make his debut as a hero, but had instead wasted his time for nothing. Suara approached him worriedly and asked if he was okay, but despair had turned Sane into a completely different person. He started strangling her, and the other girls had to intervene to stop him from killing Suara. Sane began to imagine things, assuming that everyone around him was pitying him. As a crowd gathered and started calling for the guards, Sane realized that abusing the three girls would not be good for his reputation. However, the fact that they were starting to resist him made Sane realize the brainwashing effect was wearing off. He activated his devil's eye and placed all three girls under his control once more, turning them into his puppets. One of the girls remarked that the kingdom of Armand was the ideal place for their group to make their mark, and that they should return to the country to start over with a new plan. since everything had depended on the assumption that he would obtain the holy sword. Sane lost his temper again when he realized she was implying he should kneel before King Belseal and admit defeat. Sane decided he would start pursuing other holy swords instead. He was informed that there was a nearby town called Enark, famous for its unexplored ruins. Unaware that Toru had already left his mark on that place, Sane grew excited at the thought of capturing the city's attention. However, his joy quickly vanished when the Lord of Enark announced that the ruins had already been explored by a group called the Manhwa Brigade. Ford also mentioned that this group had defeated one of the demon army's generals. When Marianta entered the room, Sane's anger subsided. He was excited to use his alluring eye on her, but his eyes immediately started to bleed. The appraisal notified him that he couldn't use this skill on someone of a higher level than himself. Before he could react, Marianta placed her blade against Sane's neck and asked what his intentions were. The Lord ordered Sane to leave the premises immediately, stating that the one who explored the ruins was someone with a pure heart, which Sane clearly lacked. After being thrown out, Sane started smashing things, proclaiming himself a hero. Finally, he decided he would return to Armon to search for the holy sword. He ordered the girls to follow him. With furious determination, he wanted to go back to being the man he once was, someone who controlled everything within his grasp. After leaving ENARC, Keide and Toru continued to train and improve their skills. They unlocked many other titles and treasures, and even taking down a giant dragon had now become easy. They also awakened the second egg and received a combat beast. Toru named it Rosuke, and it looked very different from Panda. It seemed Katie could understand the language of beasts as she communicated with them easily. As expected, the two beasts didn't get along very well. Panda was a mode of transport, while Rosuke was a warrior. However, both were useful in their own ways. When Kaide commanded that Rosuke could fly higher than Panda, Panda didn't like that and challenged his rival to a contest. Panda quickly returned to the ground after realizing he could only fly up to 10 meters, while Rosuke's ability to fly seemed limitless. As they prepared food, Toru recalled Rosuke back into the symbol on his hand. Kaide insisted on cooking the way Urara had taught her. However, Toru's appetite vanished instantly when he saw the fish and charred black frogs about to be used as ingredients. The dish had a strange purple color, and Toru suddenly felt nauseous. Contrary to his expectations, the meal turned out to be delicious. Toru praised Kaide's cooking, and she affectionately hugged him. However, Toru's fear of abandonment hadn't disappeared. The image of the girl who left him for Sahan began to haunt his thoughts, mocking him for replacing her with a slave. Toru pushed aside his fears and promised himself he would never treat Kaide like an object. The smell of the food Kaide cooked attracted a few more wyverns, and this time they were even larger than the ones they had defeated before. However, with Rosuke's power alone, he easily took down all 5 of them. Toru wasn't sure why Rosuke was so strong, because it wasn't normal for a summoned beast to have such exceptional abilities. Kaide commented that it was probably because of Toru's blood. Finally, the two arrived at the capital city of Armon and were overwhelmed by the city's beauty. Armon was famous as a center of commerce, home to many renowned adventurers. However, before exploring the city, Toru knew he had to deliver the letter entrusted to him by Count Einark. The recipient was Jonathan Rockbell, a merchant in the transportation business. On their way, one of the animals was suddenly spooked by something and lost control. The adventurers tried to control it but were unsuccessful. Just then, Toru decided to help them and easily tame the animal. The person they helped turned out to be the vice chairman, and he led Toru to Jonathan Rockbell. After reading the Count's letter, Rockbell showed particular interest. Jonathan told Toru that the Count had requested a grand reward for him, so he should return tomorrow in formal attire. However, Toru felt that this gesture could only bring trouble. Dressed in a formal tuxedo, Toru felt constrained and uncomfortable in the stiff outfit. He adjusted his collar and shared his discomfort with Kaide, who looked absolutely stunning in a sparkling dress. She reassured him that he looked very handsome and was perfectly suited for the occasion. Jonathan Rockbell arrived at their residence, riding in a carriage, and invited them aboard. During the ride, he revealed that Count Mark Heroine's request was for him to meet a distinguished individual and that this person would bring great benefits to Toru. Toru felt hesitant when Jonathan asked him not to share the details of the meeting with anyone, as the special nature of the person they were about to meet was not suited for ordinary citizens. That was why this had to be a private meeting. Upon reaching the end of their journey, Toru and Kade were surprised to find their destination was a massive castle. Climbing a series of steps, the group approached a room guarded by a servant, who asked them to wait while he announced their presence. This royal chamber was as luxurious as the rest of the grounds, with a library full of books and even a gazelle's head mounted on the wall. A tall, bearded man entered, accompanied by two soldiers. He was introduced as King Armand. Toru was once again reminded to keep this meeting a secret and not to reveal any details to the public. The king did not beat around the bush and got straight to the point. He revealed that the imperial capital was in danger and needed the help of the two adventurers to deal with the threat. Toru asked the king to clarify, and he was shocked when the king explained that he wanted Toru to eliminate the dead ant queen. King Armand stated that a large number of their soldiers had lost their lives while trying to deal with these deadly creatures. Their power was so terrifying that they could devour entire villages in just a few days. And it was only a matter of time before they targeted the imperial capital. Despite the mission's danger, Toru accepted immediately. The king offered him a territory as well as the title of hero upon success, but Toru refused. He only requested a monetary reward, and his prize was set as cash. Humu, the corps commander, was chosen to lead them to the ant nest. King Armand remained puzzled as to why Toru didn't want the title of hero, and our protagonist replied that he didn't want to stand out. Humu led them to a desolate forest, where the corpses of soldiers were scattered across the ground. It was clear the city had suffered great losses in life while dealing with this threat, and Toru was perhaps their last hope. As the group neared the ant nest, Kade suddenly asked naively if these ants were really as dangerous as people said. The question was enough to astonish the two male warriors, especially Toru. He wondered just how sheltered this girl's life had been before he bought her, as almost everyone knew of the cruelty of these ants. In the middle of their conversation, Toru didn't realize that they had unknowingly entered enemy territory until it was too late and the ant swarm had surrounded them. Humu started to panic upon seeing the sheer number of vicious creatures swarming in, and he couldn't help but doubt whether the two young adventurers could handle this perilous threat. However, his doubts were completely unfounded. With just one sweep of Toru's magic sword, an entire army of ants was wiped out, and Kaide's air press spell took down the rest. Humu was speechless, and even more shocked that the young girl could freeze the entire area, making it easy for them to locate the ant nest. Commander Humu felt useless, and with a flustered voice, he admitted his part of the mission was complete, allowing the two adventurers to proceed. The entrance to the ant nest was quite narrow and perilous. But since Toru needed to claim the ant queen's head, he knew he had to face her directly. Toru suddenly remembered that the Luntada dungeon had been added to his inventory. By selecting this option, he could transform the ant nest into a similar dungeon. Not only would this make it easier for him to navigate the area, but as the dungeon master, he could move freely between all its floors. He and Kaide immediately moved into the ant nest, where the ant queen was panicking over the intrusion into her territory. She unleashed her servant ants to attack them, but Kaide quickly wiped them all out with a single blow. However, that didn't discourage the queen. She began to devour the corpses of the dead ants, gradually growing stronger. This high-level creature could even use magic, and it suddenly attacked Toru with an ice snap, encasing him in a giant block of ice. The queen thought she had finished him off and turned to Kade with murderous intent in her eyes. However, it would take more than a simple spell to defeat Toru, our champion hero. Toru shattered the ice and confronted the ant queen. By now, her rage was at its peak. Unable to comprehend how a mere warrior could withstand her high-level attacks, She created an earthquake that nearly hit Toru, making him realize that he'd be at a great disadvantage if he continued to fight at close range. The queen proceeded to spit formic acid from her mouth to push Toru further away. This acid was extremely toxic and could incinerate a person in an instant. He tried to stay airborne, but the creature could still spray the acid high into the air. Although the toxic liquid didn't injure him, Toru didn't want to burn his clothes. Swinging his sword above his head, he deflected the stream of acid and faced his enemy with a determined gaze. Even though the queen was at level 100, the creature realized it was inferior to Toru in terms of power. As a last resort, she poured all her strength into one final attack aimed at Toru. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Toru dodged the ferocious attack and immediately lunged forward, decisively severing the queen's head with a victorious smile on his face. Toru sheathed his sword and declared another mission complete. After sweeping through the other floors, he discovered that the dungeon's monsters had taken care of the remaining death ants themselves. And in a short time, their existence was completely wiped out. Despite being decapitated, the Ant Queen could still speak, warning the adventurers of the consequences of their actions. The battle had exhausted Toru, and he had no desire to listen to her complaints. So Kaede quickly stored the queen's head in her inventory. Toru returned to the castle and presented his prize to Jonathan Rockbell. He expressed his appreciation for the warrior's excellent work, and was grateful that, thanks to his bravery, the capital was no longer under threat. Toru revealed that there weren't as many ants as the mission stated, but the Count reassured him that this was because many soldiers had already perished trying to fight them. Just then, some soldiers entered and expressed their respect for Toru's courage and skill. The humble hero couldn't help but blush at their praise. The recognition didn't stop there, as Toru and Kaede were summoned to the king's court, where a large crowd awaited them. Dressed in their finest formal attire, they prepared to face this momentous occasion. They stood before King Armand. As he expressed his gratitude for ending the threat of the killer ants once and for all, the king gifted them a chest containing 300 million gold, announcing it was a symbol of his admiration. Furthermore, he revealed that since the Manyu party was led by Toru, the entire group would be granted the title of hero. This was a rare occurrence, as usually only a single individual receives such an honor. Toru was taken aback, but since the king commanded the utmost respect, he decided to accept. King Armin declared to a roaring cheer that the Manyu party were now the heroes of the nation. After things settled down, Toru decided to spend some time with Kaede. The two were given a cozy house in the city to stay in for the time being. Jonathan Rockbell showed them around the house, revealing it was at Count Rowan's request for the warrior to be granted the hero title in his absence. Kaede made Toru a cup of coffee. Afterward, the two decided to take a walk around the city, as it had been a long time since they'd had such a relaxing day. Toru left ahead of her while Kaede cleaned up, but when he arrived at the area where they had agreed to meet, he was enraged to find two men harassing her. Toru rushed to her rescue and defeated them when they tried to attack him. When he asked why she didn't defend herself, Kaede revealed she was about to kill them before he showed up. Talk about a beautiful face hiding such insanity, you'd never expect it. After that, they visited various shops and stalls, but the highlight of the day was a trip to a boat ride park. Sitting close together, the two enjoyed the bumps and thrills of the ride as the boat drifted down a fierce stream. They panicked when the boat seemed to be plunging down a waterfall. But it was just part of the entertainment, and the ride ended with both of them soaking wet. The exhilarating feeling after the ride made them both burst out laughing, even though Kaede's new clothes were drenched. Returning home, Toru was filled with joy and satisfaction after the wonderful day with Kaede. Although she was technically still a slave, Toru had always seen her as a companion, and for the first time in years, he no longer felt alone in the world. He told her that every day they spent together was fun. Kaede smiled back, affirming that she felt the same way. Elsewhere, Sane began to suffer the consequences of his actions. His arrogance was causing even his own comrades to distance themselves from him. However, things seemed to look up when he finally found an undiscovered dungeon near the capital. Its high difficulty level convinced Sane he would become famous if he successfully cleared it. Sane only craved personal glory and didn't care about his team. The party led by Sane entered the strange forest surrounding the dungeon, where many other adventurers were present. After assessing their levels, Sane gloated, realizing they were all just amateurs. With determined eyes, his party entered the dungeon, confident they would soon complete their mission and gain renown. But a harsh reality hit them when they were surrounded by a horde of high-level orcs. Sane and his warriors were speechless. Suara couldn't handle the pressure and fainted. Even so, the selfish leader paid no mind to his comrade and charged straight at the enemy. A single blow from an orc sent Sane flying into the dungeon wall. Even their magic was no match for these high-level beasts. Sane tried to attack with electricity, but it was useless. And the orcs laughed at him. Out of magic, Lisa tried to raise an earth wall between the group and the orcs. But they easily broke through it. Sane's cowardice was finally exposed. He was the first to flee without a single glance back at his comrades. Panting heavily, they finally escaped the dungeon. Sane was losing his mind, slapping Lisa across the face. He blamed the group's weakness for their failure. Noticing the crowd's staring eyes, Sane was forced to calm down, lest he make an even worse impression. He couldn't help but remember the warmer days when Toru was still in the group. No matter how bad things got, Toru's cheerful mood always made everyone smile. Sane snapped out of his thoughts to listen to a group of adventurers passing by. They were chattering about successfully clearing the first floor and finding lots of treasure, and how with more experience, they would clear the second floor. Lisa had the brilliant idea of asking the adventurers for help, as a few tips could aid them in their quest. However, Sane's pride refused to let him ask a low-level warrior for help. Instead, he hatched a plan to follow the group. Drawing his sword, his plan was to kill these weaker adventurers and plunder their belongings. The situation took a turn for the worse for the unlucky hero, as it turned out that the male warriors were busy relieving themselves, and upon seeing Sane's arrival, they accidentally splashed their waste all over him. Back at the camp, the female warriors pinched their noses to avoid the foul stench from the area. As they searched for the source, they discovered Sane sprawled out in a field, and they all ran far away from him, demanding that he wash himself clean in the sea first. In a complete contrast, Toru was enjoying a life of luxury, attending a lavish event in Ridge. He wore his favorite tuxedo, while Kaide looked radiant sitting beside him. He sipped on expensive champagne, as Kaide revealed that this was the home of the capital's second most important marquis. So everything was of the highest class. Their conversation was interrupted by Kiwi, who broke the seal on her wrist and appeared to check on their surroundings. Kaide asked how they were able to reserve a spot for such an important auction event. Flashing back a few days, Toru had a conversation with Count Roan. Toru joked a little with the official, saying he had finally accepted the hero title the Count always wanted for him. The Count replied that it was the least he could do, considering the warrior had saved his daughter's life. When the Count's daughter was mentioned, Toru asked where she was, and he revealed that she was busy with her bridal training. Roan also made a snide remark that even a commoner with a hero's title was qualified to marry a noble lady. However, Toru didn't catch the official's meaning, and the moment passed. As he was leaving, Count Roan invited Toru to a high-class auction where he might discover a valuable item to his liking. This explained why Toru and Kaide were now sitting in such a grand venue, surrounded by the city's wealthiest people. As the host stepped onto the stage and began announcing the items up for auction, Toru noticed the sky-high prices for the magical artifacts, from a large diamond to a beautiful elf slave. However, the item that caught Toru's eye was an ancient scroll, left behind by a race from the past. None of the other billionaires understood the value of this relic, so Toru was the only one who coveted it and won the item for just 1 million. Time passed as the auctions went on, and a fairy trapped in a cage was brought onto the stage. Suddenly, Toru began to hear whispers in his ear. The voice was pleading with him for help, and Toru realized it was the fairy, begging him to save her. Toru entered a bidding war with two wealthy men who kept offering higher and higher prices. However, thanks to his success on his quests, Toru had no shortage of money and could match the other two's offers. Eventually, one of them gave up, but the other man was determined to buy the tiny fairy. This man's intentions for the fairy seem anything but pure, which only made Toru more determined to save the mythical creature from that pervert. In the end, Toru won the auction with a bid of 1 billion. When the auction ended, Toru announced that he had one last item to sell. Taking the stage, he presented a vial of elixir, a magical potion capable of healing even the most severe injuries. The auctioneer held it until it was auctioned off, and the item sold for a huge sum of money. In the back room, the auctioneer paid Toru and handed him the fairy he had just won. Back home, Toru tried to communicate with the fairy, but her hostile attitude left him scratching his head in frustration. She was hesitant to trust a human, as past experiences had proven them to be cunning creatures. However, the moment he offered her a cookie, she immediately sat up, and her mood changed completely. Toru then revealed that he had heard her cry for help, which was why he had come to rescue her. The fairy suddenly fell silent and dropped to the ground, apologizing and calling Toru her lord. She announced that Toru was descended from the dragon race, magnificent beings whose advancements were far beyond their time and who had left behind a vast number of relics. The fairy then explained that her name was Frau, and her entire family's main goal was to please the dragon folk. Toru was hesitant about being called by words like lord, but she insisted that if she didn't become his slave, her family would disown her. The fairy then assured him that she was a seasoned warrior and would support him no matter what. The next morning, Toru woke up to find Frau sleeping beside him on his pillow. After carrying her snoring body downstairs, he joined Katie for breakfast, and they discussed their next course of action. Since they would be staying in the capital for a few days, Toru decided to explore other hidden areas to see if they could find more rare items. Just then, Frau woke up and invited them both to the fairy village. She explained that the area would be beautiful at this time of year and had many relics they would enjoy exploring. However, she also revealed that the fairies weren't very friendly towards humans, so they would have to be on their guard. With their destination decided, they now needed to find a way to occupy their time for the rest of the week in the capital. They visited the guild to see if there were any available quests to take on. However, a huge commotion broke out when the citizens there recognized them as the Manhwa Brigade. They all rushed over to ask for autographs, hoping for a chance to meet the legendary group. Even the guildmaster was excited to be in the presence of such legends and announced that they had been promoted to an S-rank group due to their heroic status. Toru, being an introvert, disliked all the attention and asked Kaede to create a blinding light to cause a distraction. Taking this opportunity, they vanished into thin air. Once outside, Toru concluded that it would probably be easier to just laze around at home. The other two agreed, and they returned to their humble abode. Toru got ready to use water magic while Kaede watched the scene in amazement. Of course, he also used other elements like earth and wind to create a giant dust storm. But this didn't seem to help him much. Kaede was worried about having to use wind magic in this situation, while Toru was dissatisfied with his own efforts. He was about to try again when, luckily, Kaede had had enough of his magic use. Though it pained her to speak up as a slave, she blurted out that her master's magic was clearly too dangerous. She knew he was trying to adjust the storm with a spell, but his method of release was rather unstable. Hearing this, Toru went on the defensive, boasting that he could use his magic continuously and that its power was perfect. Perhaps he should try to use it more effectively for something. At this point, he recalled that he had always wanted a fire sword when he was a child. Thinking about fire caused his magic to go haywire, and a flame burst from his hand, terrifying Kaede. She was almost certain her master was trying to kill her. Toru apologized to her when a notification informed him that the level 3 dungeon was now level 5, which left him feeling confused. Kaede explained that she had heard about a dungeon before and learned that a difficult one had appeared in the capital. Apparently, the items that appeared in this dungeon were of rare value, so it had become very popular among adventurers. Hearing this, Toru shouted, asking if this was the dungeon where they had defeated the dead ants. Kaide believed this was true, while Toru panicked about the dungeon's upgrade, although it might be because too many adventurers had died all over the place. This obviously made Toru panic even more. His screams reminded Kaide of a demon king. On the other hand, for Toru, having a dungeon near where they lived was pretty great as an adventurer. And since he was its owner, he believed they should check it out. They realized they could even transport there. So it only took a second for them to arrive at a rather strange place. It seemed they were on a floor below the center of the stone. Toru came up with the idea that they could use it as a storage space, which might have been the best idea he'd ever had. Kaide was also ready to take advantage of the space and took out Toru's clothing collection to spread on the floor. Toru found it strange that she had stolen his clothes, but decided to pretend he didn't see. He thought building a wall for Kaide's space would be a better idea. At that moment, Panda tried to fight Kaide for the space. The little guy was being quite territorial, trying to crowd Kaide out under his giant eye. This was very amusing to Toru, seeing Panda get the upper hand on Kaide, and laughed out loud, watching the two of them flee from him at high speed. The next morning, Toru felt like he was in heaven with a delicious cup of coffee. However, Kaide reminded him that they needed to discuss their plans for the day. But it turned out she had a lot of complaints about housework. Apparently, she was thinking about doing laundry, but had no other clothes besides the set she was wearing. Perhaps they should take her shopping. Kaide loved the idea of going into town and buying some new things. Toru also agreed to her request since he had also run out of things to wear. Kaide, clearly, still hadn't admitted to stealing his clothes. But soon enough, the group arrived in town and wondered if they could find any clothes that would fit Frau, because her size was so small. A perfect idea came to mind. Go to a doll shop and hope for the best. They entered the shop and Frau started trying on a few outfits. While looking at the dolls around her, Toru was suddenly reminded of Nei and Sora, who had dolls when they were little. Lisa also used to have an expensive doll, but she threw it away, just like how she threw Toru away. Old wounds don't fade easily. Toru snapped out of his deep thoughts when the shop owner appeared and offered a fairy costume made by his late wife. He was willing to give the costume away for free, purely out of sentiment for his wife. Toru and his group happily accepted the outfit for Frau. Afterward, Toru observed the dolls more closely, while Frau put on a small fashion show for them, having to show off all the new outfits she'd just tried on. They quickly left the shop after buying everything they liked, and said goodbye to the old shopkeeper. The old man was stunned to see a large stack of money on the counter. Couldn't believe that Toru had just made him rich. But it was clear he was enjoying the surprise. The next morning, while it was still early, Kaide burst into Toru's room and demanded he take off his shirt so she could wash it. Of course, Toru knew the real reason she wanted his shirt, so he tried to convince her to wash the bedsheets first, since they were covered in food. But Kaide was just as clever, telling him that his shirt was just as dirty as the bedsheets. Kaide's eagerness to wash the shirt was all too obvious, so Toru gave in and took off his shirt for her to wash. Later, Toru went downstairs for breakfast and noticed the bread and coffee were a little different today. As he was wondering about it, Kaide revealed that she was trying a new bakery the neighbor's wife had recommended. She looked so happy having settled into life in the capital, creating a warm and peaceful atmosphere. That made Toru feel anxious, thinking about how he didn't want to leave after just a week of living in the capital, but he couldn't think of anywhere else to go next. Kaide didn't have a specific place she wanted to visit either, but she was very excited to go shopping with Toru. It seemed their food supply was running low because Frau ate as much as 5 people. So, Toru had no choice but to agree to go out and buy more food. Meanwhile, Panda and Frau broke another window in the house. This made Toru furious. But there was nothing he could do since the two of them had run off before he could react. He needed to get used to these two troublemakers, always causing some kind of mischief. While out in town, Toru overheard a conversation about sandworms that had just appeared in the fields in various parts of Armon. What caught his attention was hearing about tornadoes, heavy rains and earthquakes in the area, which caused an imbalance in the natural habitat, forcing the worms to surface. He knew all of this was caused by his magic, but the guilt wouldn't stop gnawing at him. Meanwhile, Toru tried to act like he hadn't heard the conversation and carried on with his friends. Kaede started shopping for vegetables and was drawn to the fresh, delicious-looking tomatoes. Right after, she heard Toru say they needed to stock up on canned food, which clearly meant they would have to continue their adventure. This made Kaede a little sad, as she wasn't ready to give up the comfortable routine and life she had established in the capital. Toru also felt it would be better to stay here, but a part of him couldn't forget what had happened. This was a journey to heal his broken heart and move on. He definitely couldn't stay here forever. After they finished buying everything they needed, they were about to leave, when Toru saw a woman who seemed to have lost her 5-year-old daughter, named Kumin. Always ready to help, Toru also began searching for little Kumin around the capital's square, and asked Kaede to use her sense of smell to track her. Kaede took Kumin's handkerchief from her mother to get a scent, and quickly discovered that Kumin was still near the market area. Immediately, the group ran in the direction Kaede led them and finally found Kumin sitting alone in an alley. The reunion between mother and daughter was truly touching. Until sandworms suddenly burst up from underground. Toru knew he needed to get Kumin and her mother to safety first. So he asked Kaede to distract the worm while he led the mother and daughter to safety. Toru was determined to face the sandworm because he knew he should have used his magic more responsibly. However, this wasn't the time for regrets, but for hunting and destroying them. Meanwhile, Kaede was doing a great job distracting the sandworm. When Toru returned, he realized the sandworm could regenerate, which was insane. He looked over at Kaede, whose clothes had been melted by the worm's acid, leaving her incredibly embarrassed. After covering herself up, she told him that her magic was useless today, so Toru would have to use his. This terrified him, as he knew that just one small mistake could lead to the destruction of the entire city. Toru focused all the elements once more, including wind, earth, water, and fire to deal with the sandworm. In the end, he defeated the giant monster all by himself, earning him the praise of the entire city for his heroic act. Afterward, Toru and his friends left the capital, beginning their adventure to the elf village, excited to face the challenges that lay ahead. Toru and his party stopped in the border town of Griget, where they woke up comfortably in their beds. Toru found out that Frau was looking for him, which made him think she might want to ask him for something, as she was quite eager to get to the elf village. Just then, Kaede realized that her master's armor was about to break, so she suggested he buy a new set. Luckily, she knew exactly where to find good armor. She quickly led him to the Temple of the Divine Weapon, which looked just as its name suggested, grand and impressive. Toru couldn't hold back his smile. The divine weapon was actually a sword, but it wasn't limited to a single form. If the user clearly envisioned the weapon they wanted before drawing the sword, that weapon would manifest. The performance of the divine weapon was truly outstanding, as it was nearly indestructible and could also provide a powerful stat boost, along with a temporary level up. Toru was a bit skeptical since he already owned one divine weapon, and getting a second one seemed nearly impossible. However, his confidence grew when he realized that Kaede truly believed in him and his skills. Suddenly, they saw some footprints on the ground, which made them both curious. It seemed like 3 or 4 people had been here before them and might have already taken the divine weapon. Even so, they pressed forward and breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the divine weapon was still there. As Toru approached the sword, a million thoughts flooded his mind, and he began to doubt himself once again. At this point, the story reveals that a few days earlier, in the capital, Sane had entered a tavern and asked about high-paying jobs. He presented himself as a famous hero who needed no introduction, but soon he lost his temper when he didn't receive the respect he expected. Everyone told Sane that if he wanted special treatment, he needed to build a reputation for himself, just like Toru's party had done. Hearing this, Sane completely lost it and lunged forward to punch a bystander, leading to a massive brawl breaking out in the tavern. The people of the capital were also angered by his behavior and decided to throw him out for being a fake hero who only hurt innocent people. Fortunately, the members of Sane's party managed to calm him down, giving him a chance to ask for more information about Toru's group. The bartender told him about the leader of the group he was looking for. Toru's party had defeated some of the most dangerous beasts in the country, including the Death Ant Queen, which no one had been able to beat for a very long time. After hearing about this group's heroic tales, Sane shouted, absolutely certain that if he had been in the capital, he would have easily outshone this low-rank party. He continued to investigate them and discovered that the Manhwa Brigade had gone to Griget. A wicked smile spread across Sane's face upon hearing this news, and he ordered his party to prepare for the trip immediately. Sane and his party tracked the Manhwa Brigade to Griget, even managing to find the exact place they were staying. Their actions made Sane and his cronies look like actual stalkers. Sane decided to claim the holy sword for himself first, and then he would tear Toru to pieces. Of course, Sane had no idea that his old friend Toru, the leader of the Manhwa Brigade, had arrived at the Temple of Holy Weapons with his team, ready to become the master of a holy sword after overcoming countless hardships. This was his moment to shine. However, when Toru tried to lift the sword, it seemed to be stuck fast in the ground. He used all his strength but still couldn't lift it. The sword seemed to have a will of its own, which only made him angrier. Meanwhile, Sane had also failed to claim the divine sword the day before. However, when it was Toru's turn, he succeeded, and the sword transformed into a magnificent set of armor for him. This armor was as light as a feather, giving him much more agility in battle. After getting equipped, Toru's group set off again, continuing their journey to the fairy village. As they camped for the night, Toru realized he needed to learn more about Kaidi's past, especially after he heard her talking in her sleep. Perhaps he should start paying more attention to this cute slave girl. Frau shone like a true hero as she confronted a pack of monsters, while Toru and Kaide could only watch in awe as the little girl fought so impressively. Frau was happy to show off her skills, as she was eager for Toru to see her in a different light. Hearing this, Toru said he never had a negative impression of her, but this made Frau think he was lying, as she was convinced Toru never thought she was capable of a real fight. The poor girl clearly needed a little encouragement. Toru agreed that he had underestimated Frau, while the fairy discovered that her level had jumped to 35, something almost impossible. This led Toru to believe that his companion's experience was being multiplied by his skill, although this could be considered cheating. Frau didn't mind, as long as she could keep leveling up. She immediately flew off to fight some more. Watching her fly away, Toru and Kaide began to worry, as no one could lead the way, and Frau was the only one who knew the path to the fairy village. They decided to sit down and rest while Kaide made some coffee. Just then, a few fairies attacked Toru and Kaide. Even though they just wanted to rest, the leader of the fairies realized that Toru was no ordinary human and decided to challenge him to a duel. However, Toru didn't want to fight because he didn't want to hurt Frau's friends. He really wished Frau hadn't left. As the fairy leader prepared to use a wide-range magic spell, Toru became desperate, shouting for Frau to come back. Just then, they felt something rushing towards them at incredible speed. Toru breathed a sigh of relief, knowing it had to be Frau. When Frau returned, she was not happy to see her friends attacking her master. At that moment, the truth was revealed that the leader of the fairy troop was Frau's father. He respectfully led them to the fairy village. When they arrived, the stunning scenery made everyone smile and gaze in wonder. They were led to a small house, just big enough to accommodate humans. There, they met Frau's grandfather, who was also the village chief. Toru was horrified to witness the old man strike his own son for having hurt Toru. As it turned out, Toru belonged to the great race, and this helped Toru better understand Frau's intention in bringing him near the village. Frau's grandfather began to explain that the village was facing a serious situation, one that the villagers couldn't resolve on their own. They were forced to seek help from the outside, and only the Great Race could help them. This was why Frau had left to find Toru. It turned out that Frau had the ability to read prayers for the Great Race, which made her perfect for the mission, even though she didn't look anything like a priestess. Frau also revealed that finding Toru had been quite difficult. She had spent over a year searching for him until she was captured by humans and sold. However, that turned out to be a stroke of luck because it led her to discover Toru, which made him start to believe in fate as well. Even so, Toru needed to know more about the problem this village was facing before making any decisions. Frau and her grandfather led Toru outside to show him the golem that was trying to destroy the villagers. It had woken up one day, out of nowhere, and started attacking. Although they had tried to attack it, they couldn't leave even a single scratch on its body. Currently, they were using magic to bind it, but they didn't know how long they could hold it. Toru began to think deeply about the situation and approached the golem to get a closer look, despite the fairies trying to stop him. Of course, he got too close and realized the golem had no autonomy, which meant they had no choice but to destroy it. Suddenly, the golem broke free from its restraints, and Toru told Kaide to stand behind him while he handled the situation. The battle between Toru and the golem was intense, with the golem overpowering him at times. But Toru skillfully evaded the monster's attacks without getting hurt. After some time dodging and studying its attack patterns, Toru realized that the golem was very powerful. But he was also a hero with many secret moves up his sleeve. He leapt up and delivered a fatal blow to the golem, finishing it off. The fairies and Kaide jumped for joy at Toru's victory. Truly, the Great Race possesses immense power. To celebrate this victory, Frau's grandfather would surely throw a lavish feast. Meanwhile, Sane's group, on their quest for the Holy Sword, had finally reached the North Star. Everyone was drenched in sweat from the harsh heat, and they complained that if Sane had just gotten the Holy Sword from the previous temple, they wouldn't have had to travel this far. Their words only made Sane lose his composure even more. He gritted his teeth and called them noisy women. His reputation back home was on the verge of collapse, and Sane knew it. However, he blamed the 3 women he had mesmerized with his charming demon eyes. Sane was so frustrated his eyes felt like they were about to pop out. He cursed his fate and promised himself he would get the Holy Sword this time, because if he didn't, there would be no tomorrow for him. While he could endure the harsh terrain and hot weather, the 3 girls couldn't take it anymore. They saw a place to sit nearby and asked Sane to stop for a rest and a bite to eat. Sane glared at them angrily and said they were almost at the temple, so there was no reason to stop now. However, Sane knew full well that he had reached his own limit and could pass out at any moment. Finally, he agreed to stop and eat in the city, which made the girls happily head towards it, while Sane secretly planned to deal with them later, as in his eyes, they had become a burden. When they arrived in the city, which was filled with humans and demi-humans, the people there were cheerful and seemed to be enjoying life, despite the harsh weather. San and the 3 girls entered a nearby restaurant. However, their appetites quickly vanished when they saw worms and insects being served. They wondered how anyone could possibly eat such an unappetizing dish. San commented that the people in the city must be crazy to eat this stuff. But when he looked to his side, he was shocked to see one of his women enjoying the insect dish with relish. She remarked that although it didn't look good, it actually tasted delicious. Even though Sane's stomach was growling, he refused to believe that insects could be tasty. He planned to get rid of the woman who ate it, assuming she'd been infected. Along with the other 2 girls, he decided to just eat salad and bread to satisfy his hunger. However, after realizing he didn't want to waste the food they had ordered and not knowing when their next meal would be, Sane began to eat the insects frantically, comically declaring that he was a hero who wasn't afraid of any bugs. They continued their journey to the temple, with the sun at its peak and not a bit of shade in sight. After what felt like an eternity, they finally arrived. The girls looked fine, but Sane looked like he was just minutes away from collapsing. They asked if he was okay, and it was clear his stomach was in agony. He complained that if everyone ate the same thing, why was he the only one suffering the consequences? clutching his stomach and fuming about the unfair situation. Sane glared at the girl who had eaten twice as many insects, but he calmed himself down by remembering the holy sword. It was his only motivation now. Finally, they found the temple gate, but Sane struggled to open it. He was trembling, and the girls wondered why his legs were shaking so much. It turned out he was trying his best to hold in the gas from his stomach ache. After a great deal of effort, Sane finally opened the gate, and the girls cheered when they saw the holy sword right in front of them. The only problem was that it was still a long way to the pedestal, and Sane seemed to have reached his limit. He admitted he couldn't take it anymore, each step feeling like an eternity to him, while the girls urged him to hurry up. Sane finally reached the sword but struggled to pull it out. He was worried that if he used too much strength, he might let slip what he was trying to hold in. One of the girls jumped in to help him, and together they pulled the sword out. Everyone celebrated, and Sane finally let out a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, back in the fairy village, Toru and Kaide were having a wonderful time. While Sane had to taste test insects, Toru was enjoying sweet fairy mead. People danced all around while delicious dishes were continuously brought to them. Papao asked Toru how his daughter was doing as his companion. Toru replied that since she had just joined the group, it was still hard to say, but he expected great things from her. When Toru mentioned he was uncomfortable with the idea of Papao's daughter being his slave, Papao reminded him that fairies are servants to the great race, and their only duty is to serve. The other fairies also gathered around Toru, creating a cheerful atmosphere that suddenly made him feel nostalgic. Toru remembered what it felt like to be with his parents, and he excused himself to go outside. Kaide, however, knew that something was up with him. While Toru was sitting alone in a secluded spot on the summit, Kaide quickly approached him. She asked how he was feeling. Since it looked like he was trying to find an excuse to leave the party, Toru complimented Kaide on her perceptiveness. Toru said that seeing Frau's family reminded him of his own. When Kaide asked about his parents' death, Toru recounted his tragic story. It turns out, when he was 15, he came home to find his parents' bodies. They had been attacked by one of the wealthiest families in the region, but everyone assumed they were attacked by robbers. Since then, Toru hadn't seen any of his other relatives and had been living on his own. However, Lisa was by his side during the worst of it, and thanks to her, Toru decided to keep living. That's why having Lisa with him meant so much. Kaide interrupted, asking if the woman Toru was talking about was the one who betrayed him. Toru smiled and said her name was Lisa. He admitted he was shocked when they broke up, but never thought he wasn't good enough for her. Before Toru could say any more and break down, Kaide hugged him tightly to comfort him. Afterward, the three of them continued their journey through the forest and arrived at another ruin. Toru asked Frau if this was the place where the original golem slept, and she confirmed it. He asked Kaide to use her appraisal skill to search for ancient artifacts in the area. While thinking about what task he should give Frau, Toru ultimately asked her to use this opportunity to level up. After Frau flew off, Toru began to inspect the ancient objects himself. Before long, Kaide called him over, having found something suspicious. Toru saw a statue in a strange pose. He gave it a little nudge, and the statue toppled over, revealing a secret passage. Surprised and excited, Toru decided to explore the area. After going down a great many stairs, the two of them discovered an orb of light floating in mid-air. They followed the orb and eventually came across strange symbols on the ground.